So for the last couple months, I've been seeing a lot of opinions on people about the Let Them Theory book by Mel Robbins, and there's been a lot of extreme mixed opinions on this book, some very high praising, some very low. I saw one creator today say that they wish they could burn the book, which I think is a bit of an exaggeration, but I wanted today to just give my honest opinion, both as a person and as a therapist, and let you know if I would recommend this book or not, and to whom. So I think a lot of the critics are honestly criticizing this book simply because Mel Robbins is a woman. I'm just gonna be so real on that. I don't like to play that card too often because I think a lot of creators on here can just like say buzzwords like she's a woman, sexism, all these things, right? But I truly believe it's because Mel Robbins is a woman. Now, there are some other critiques of it. She's not a mental health professional. That is very true. She is a lawyer turned life coach, which I get it these days. Who isn't a life coach? I understand that. I actually think that Mel Robbins is a pretty decent life coach, especially when it comes to professionals and when it comes to individuals who work in corporate, very specifically. So people who are very career oriented and people who work in either a more corporate setting or maybe they own businesses themselves. Those are the three areas I know she shines best in. Another critique I hear is that the Let Them Theory is nothing new. I've heard some therapists who have had critiques about it in my circle, and they've talked about how they just think it's more glorified radical acceptance, which I could honestly see it being that way. I will give that as a fair critique of the book. I don't think it's anything original. Mel doesn't cite it as anything original. In fact, she goes out of her way to cite her reasonings for the book, sometimes where it comes from. Another critique that they give is that they did not cite the person who wrote the poem recently about Let Them a few years ago. I don't know her name, so if you know her name, tag her in here. I know she was upset at one point about this too. I know others were upset about this. My honest to God take on this is I think that more people should know about the person who wrote the poem, but I also don't think that Mel did anything wrong, simply for the reason being that she didn't plagiarize the poem because the poem wasn't there prior to the evidence of Let Them and all the stuff talking about Let Them. Let Them has been a concept and a theory and whatever you want to call it for many years and many decades, and Mel put her own spin on it. So just because letting people do whatever they want in certain cases, which we're going to talk about in this video too, I don't think that she plagiarized it. Should she have cited that person? Maybe debatable, but I think she cited a lot of people in this book to where she's not citing this as her brand new, big, original idea. I've actually written two of my own books. The first one is called Hire a Coach, Not a Tutor for ADHDers in their 20s. It helps give people with ADHD in adulthood a much easier time in life. Are they my absolute original tricks and hacks and whatever you want to call it in the book? No. Are they my own spin on them? Absolutely. I didn't invent ADHD. I didn't invent the ADHD wheel. I didn't invent executive functioning skills building, right? I just put my own spin on stuff, and I sourced places that I needed to source. In my current book coming out, Life Has No Purpose and You Die, How to Stop Overthinking So You Can Start Living, I cite a lot of death positive stuff in there. I am not the inventor of death positivity. I don't even know if Caitlin Doty is the inventor of death positivity. She might be, I'm not sure. But she has talked a lot about death positivity, so I cited her as a source in my book. So just because there's certain concepts that go around and you put them in your own work, it does not mean that you plagiarize them. If you're sourcing them or you're giving credit to them, that's not plagiarism. But I do think that a fair critique of the book is that it isn't necessarily original. If you're looking for something more original, more up to date, right, it definitely is not one of those books. It's not a life-changing book. Personally, I like the 5-second rule more. I do like this book, The Let Them Theory, but I think her book, The 5-Second Rule, is a lot easier in terms of application and how to take action. That's actually a big inspiration for what I call the PAM method, because it only takes a few seconds for you to ignite and act. But again, I cite her actually in my new book. I talk about the PAM method, and I actually cite her as one of the inspirations as this. But as far as originality, no, it's not original by any means. There's a lot of sourcing, there's a lot of personal stories, but as far as the concept of the Let Them Theory, it definitely is not an original book or an original idea. Now, as far as application of it, I think that personally, she makes it very easy to follow. If you've actually read the book and you read the book with an open mind, not someone going in to critique it, you're going to find a lot of benefit about it. Again, if you're a professional, if you work in corporate, or if you own your own business, I'm in two of those three categories right now. She does talk about in the book that you do not just let people walk all over you when it comes to racism, sexism, when it comes to abuse, things like that. You do not do that. She does cite that several times in the book, and she does say that several times in the book. A lot of people are saying that you don't just let a narcissist do whatever. She kind of says this in the book. So that tells me a lot of people who are critiquing it either just flat out ignore those parts of the book, or maybe they wish she would have talked more about that, which debatably, I would say maybe she could have, but she didn't just skip over it entirely. Overall, I think this book really helps you learn how to stop caring what other people think, stop trying to predict what other people think of you, and allow yourself to just accept reality as it is. While this is the big part of the book, this is the let them, let me part, right? Because that's a big part of this book is let them, let me. It's not just let them. Let me explore my own options so that I can worry about my side of the street, is essentially the theme of that book. I think it's easy to follow. I think it's easy to understand. I also think with this book, if you're looking to have a problem with it, you're going to absolutely find it. Because it's easy to find it in a book called Let Them. Because you're just going to be like, oh, you're just going to let them do whatever. But again, she talks about this in a lot of different cases in her book, where she talks about you're not just going to take someone abusing you. You're not just going to take someone saying whatever they want to you. But here's how you practice the let them theory in those instances and how you apply them. And also, how do you adapt the let them theory to different situations? This is also a very general book, much like any self-help book is going to be. It's only going to get to be so right given one person's situation, right? So there's things in the book that just wouldn't apply to me. I have ADHD. By the way, I know a lot of people are saying that about the book too. It's not taking into account for people with ADHD, anything like that. Mel Robbins also has ADHD, so I am just going to kind of throw that to the side for a minute. And not that she is the representative of all things ADHD, but neither am I. But I will sit here and say that there are some things in the book that help my ADHD. There's some things that just would not. And that just is what it is at the end of the day. Now, would this be a book that I recommend to clients that we could discuss in some of our sessions? Potentially, yes. I have recommended to a few clients, very specifically individuals who are, again, they work in professional settings, they work in corporate, or they are small business owners. Or maybe they're having some very baseline, problems with their family, boundaries with their family, things like that. I don't think this is the perfect book on dealing with a narcissist, but she does kind of cover stuff like that in the book too. I just think that there are better books out there for that. But for general family stuff, yeah, I think it's a really good book, and I think it's a good refresher to learn how to stop listening to what every person says in your life and start taking action for yourself and your hopes and your dreams. And to elaborate on something I said earlier, I truly don't think that if Mel Robbins was a man writing this book, this would even be an issue. If this was written by someone like, let's say, Gary Vee, we wouldn't even be having really this discussion right now. It would probably get a lot of praise, and then in a couple weeks, it would probably just fade out, and that would be that, because then he'd be on to the next project or something like that. I notice that we, by default, tend to criticize the work of women a lot more compared to men. Do I think this is a perfect book? Absolutely not. But do I think it's a bad book? No. I think a lot of people are being overly exaggerant, and I fear that a lot of people who are actually reviewing this book or giving their opinions on the book actually haven't read the book. They're looking at the cover of the book, looking at the synopsis, and then just watching sound bites or interview clips. But they're not actually getting into the book itself. So, would I recommend this book to my clients? I absolutely would, but only in certain circumstances. So I wouldn't recommend it to every single client. I don't think it's the holy Bible of self-help by any means of the imagination, but I don't think any self-help book is going to do that. I think that you're going to get that truly in therapy or in other settings. You're going to have to do that interpersonally too. So even if it's outside of therapy, you can do stuff for yourself that's going to give you more benefit than this book. But do I think the book is a good guide for a lot of people? Absolutely, 100%. I highly recommend.